Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. We are your expert guides through the vast ocean of information, pulling out the most vital nuggets of knowledge from your sources to get you truly well-informed, quickly.
And today we're embarking on an incredibly powerful journey. We're doing a deep dive into Bryan Stevenson's profoundly moving and, frankly, essential work, Just Mercy, a story of justice and redemption.
Yeah, absolutely essential. Our mission today is really to explore the core themes that Stevenson brings to light through his own experiences, founding and working with the Equal Justice Initiative.
Exactly. We're talking about the deep roots of systemic racism and injustice within the U.S. criminal justice system. That's huge.
And also the transformative power of empathy, of mercy, something he comes back to again and again.
Right. Alongside the just tragic reality of wrongful convictions, the death penalty itself, and how the system critically fails some of the most vulnerable people among us.
Specifically thinking about children and the mentally ill. You've given us some really extensive material on this book, and we're going to help you understand the most crucial insights and maybe some surprising facts from this vital narrative.
Okay, so where do we start? I think we have to start with Stevenson himself, right? His own background is so key.
Absolutely. You can't understand the book without understanding where he comes from.
Huh?
He grew up in a pretty unique but also stark environment. We're talking about a poor rural settlement on the Delmarva Peninsula over in Delaware.
And racially segregated. Deeply so. Not just sort of, theoretically segregated, but in everyday life.
Yeah, he talks about this long shadow of the country's racial history just hanging over everything. Confederate flags weren't just like a historical footnote. They were openly displayed.
Right, kind of marking the territory, marking the power structure as a constant visual. And he describes how African Americans lived in specific colored sections, these ghettos, often in tiny shacks, many without even indoor plumbing.
It paints such a vivid picture. He mentions sharing play spaces with chickens and pigs. It just highlights the disparity, the hierarchy that was built into that community.
And his own family story really personalizes this systemic stuff. His father, for instance, had to leave the area just to go to high school.
Think about that. No high school for Black kids locally. He had to leave home as a teenager.
Yeah. He eventually came back with Stevenson's mother, worked in a food factory, did domestic work on weekends just to make ends meet. It's clear this racial difference just constrained everything. Education, work, where you lived.
And then there's the influence of his grandmother. Born in the 1880s, her parents had been enslaved.
Imagine the history she carried. Her father, Stevenson's great-grandfather, secretly learned to read and write before emancipation. That was incredibly risky, a real act of defiance.
And that legacy, that mix of trauma and resilience, clearly shaped her. She constantly told Stevenson, keep close.
Which wasn't just, stay safe. It was deeper than that. It was about community, connection, protection, a kind of wisdom passed down through generations who'd faced injustice. Keep close.
So he carries all this history, this very personal understanding of injustice, into law school. And he admits, at first it felt really abstract, disconnected.
Right. Lots of theory, maybe not enough reality. Until 1983, he took this intensive one-month course on race and poverty litigation.
And that was the turning point.
Seems like it. It took students out of the classroom into the field. He ended up interning with the Southern Prisoners Defense Committee, the SPDC, in Atlanta.
And this was a critical time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Executions were starting up again in the South.
Exactly. And very few lawyers were doing this work. The SPDC was getting swamped with desperate calls from people on death row, people with execution dates looming, who had absolutely no legal help. Zero.
It sounds like being thrown into the deep end.
Completely. And then came that moment, his first visit to death row. He drives there alone, heart-pounding, barely understanding capital appeals. Maybe not even sure he wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah, he describes feeling unsure, intimidated, and then he meets Henry.
Henry, a condemned man, shackled.
Yeah.
But he starts singing this old hymn, Higher Ground. Stevenson describes it as slow, sincere, full of conviction.
Wow.
And it just floored Stevenson. The sheer humanity of it, coming from someone in that situation. He called the song a precious gift. It completely changed his understanding of human potential, of redemption, of hope.
So that was it. That moment fueled his commitment.
Instantly. He knew right then he had to help people on death row. It wasn't just a job choice. It felt like a calling. And it gave him this core realization.
Which was?
That proximity matters. Being close to the condemned, to the incarcerated, it makes the question of their humanity urgent. It's not abstract anymore.
So that abstract law school stuff suddenly became very real, very important.
Totally. He started devouring courses on constitutional law, litigation, race, poverty, power. That encounter with Henry unlocked everything for him. You can't fight for justice from a distance. You have to get close.
And this personal experience, this awakening, directly informs his analysis of the whole system, right? How it became this architecture of mass incarceration.
Precisely. He saw how the system wasn't just flawed. It actively sanctioned the death penalty and extreme punishments. It wasn't an accident. It was policy.
Leading to this explosion in the prison population. Hundreds of thousands of nonviolent offenders locked up for decades.
The numbers are just mind-boggling. You mentioned the source data. Over 500,000 people currently in state or federal prison just for drug offenses.
Compared to, what, 41,000 back in 1980?
Yeah. It's a massive, massive increase in a relatively short time. And he connects it directly to the politics of fear and anger.
Policies like abolishing parole in many places, those 3 strikes and you're out laws.
They were all about seeming tough. Rehabilitation, education, any kind of support services for prisoners, completely abandoned.
Instead, the focus became punishment, reducing people, as he says, to their worst acts, branding them criminally, permanently.
Regardless of circumstances, regardless of change or growth, it's a system built to punish, not to heal or redeem.
And the consequences ripple outwards, don't they? He talks about the collateral consequences creating this new caste system.
It's devastating. It's not just the person locked up. Think about poor women with prior drug convictions being banned from food stamps, from public housing.
Forcing them into homelessness, maybe separating them from their families, making it almost impossible to find work.
Plus, losing the right to vote in many states. It's this multi-layered trap that continues long after the sentence is supposedly served. It perpetuates inequality.
And he argues this isn't entirely new, right? It's like a modern version of older forms of racial control.
Absolutely. He connects it back to the period after Reconstruction when those racial integrity laws were put in place across the South.
The purpose being, what? To maintain the racial hierarchy.
Exactly. By criminalizing things like interracial sex and marriage, controlling relationships, controlling lineage to keep white supremacy intact.
And you even see this reflected in early Supreme Court cases, like Pace v. State.
Right, 1882. The court upheld Alabama's restrictions on interracial relationships using that separate but equal logic.
Which is chilling because that was 20 years before Plessy v. Ferguson, the case everyone knows for establishing separate but equal.
It shows how early these ideas were embedded in the legal system. And these bans weren't just a Southern thing. Idaho, for example, had them too, even though the state was overwhelmingly white.
It's just incredible how persistent these ideas were. Alabama's own constitution still technically banned interracial marriage in 1986.
Long after the Supreme Court struck down those bans in Loving v. Virginia in '67, and even more telling, when they finally put it to a vote in Alabama in 2000 to remove the ban.
Let me guess, it wasn't unanimous.
Not even close. 41% of voters chose to keep the ban. It shows how deeply ingrained these biases remained, even when legally toothless.
And Stevenson felt this himself, didn't he? Even as a lawyer. That story about being stopped by police in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder. Late at night, stopped by these sort of military-dressed, non-standard cops, weapons drawn, gun pointed at him.
And they searched his car illegally, no reason given.
None whatsoever, just pure intimidation based on his race.
And his reflection on that is so powerful. He was 28, a lawyer. He knew how to stay calm, knew his rights, mostly.
But he wonders, what if he'd been younger, less equipped? It just highlights the constant threat, the precariousness, especially for black men.
And the statistics back this up, tragically. Black men significantly more likely to be killed by police.
8 times more likely in '78, still 4 times more likely by '98. And things like stand your ground laws, he argues, often make it worse for black individuals trying to defend themselves.
And the follow-up to his own incident, the lack of accountability.
Nothing. No apology, no acknowledgement of the illegal search, and he wrestled with whether to even file a complaint, despite being a civil rights lawyer himself.
It just shows how the system can wear you down, silence you, even when you know it's wrong. It's deeply systemic.
Which leads us directly into the heart of the book.
Yeah.
The case of Walter McMillian.
Right. Stevenson meets him in 1988. Alabama's death row population is exploding, and there's no public defender system.
Meaning dozens, maybe close to 100 people like Walter, facing execution with no lawyer at all. It's hard to even fathom that level of injustice.
And Walter's stance from day one was
complete innocence. He never wavered. But his case was instantly radioactive, not because of evidence, but because of race and relationships.
He was a black man involved with a married white woman, Karen Kelly.
And in that time and place, particularly in rural Alabama, that was seen as unconscionable. It tapped into this deep, ugly history where even the suggestion of such intimacy could lead to violence, to lynching. The hostility towards him was immediate and intense.
And the actual case against him, it sounds like a setup.
Oh, completely. The facts point to Karen Kelly and another man, Ralph Myers, being involved in one murder. But the sheriff, Tate, and the DA, they decided to pin a different, unrelated murder, Rhonda Morrison's, on Walter.
Despite him having a solid alibi.
An ironclad alibi. He was at a community fish fry that morning, miles away, with tons of witnesses. It wasn't just credible. Lots of people knew where he was.
So how did they even arrest him?
It was brutal. Stopped his truck, guns drawn, accused him of sodomy, this bizarre, unrelated charge, clearly just a pretext.
And Walter's reaction?
He was confused, maybe laughed nervously when the sheriff explained the term crudely, and Tate just unleashed this torrent of racial slurs, the N-word, threats. The contempt was palpable right from the start.
And then the most shocking part, they sent him to death row before trial.
Yes, pretrial detention on death row. It's incredibly rare, a flagrant violation of the presumption of innocence. It basically declared him guilty before any jury heard the case. A deliberate, chilling move.
And the conditions there, you described them earlier, just horrifying.
Windowless concrete cells, 5 by 8 feet, sweltering heat in the summer, over 100 degrees, trapping rats and snakes just to cope. Isolation.
And the constant talk of the electric chair, especially that botched execution of John Evans.
14 minutes. Sparks, flames, the smell, 3 jolts, and he was still alive after 2. Walter heard about that constantly in his first weeks there. Imagine the psychological terror.
So the trial itself, it sounds like it was doomed from the start.
Fundamentally unjust. An all-white jury in a county that was 40–50% black.
Even after the Supreme Court's Batson ruling tried to stop racially biased jury selection.
Prosecutors just found ways around it. More subtle ways to exclude black jurors. The bias was still there, just maybe less blatant.
And the state's witnesses? Myers, Hooks, Hightower?
Their testimony was, as Stevenson puts it, laughably inconsistent, not believable. Myers, the main guy, claimed Walter kidnapped him to drive to the crime scene. The story just fell apart under scrutiny.
And when someone did come forward to support Walter's alibi, Darnell Houston.
He was immediately indicted for perjury. A clear tactic. Stevenson saw it right away. To intimidate anyone else who might speak the truth. To silence the community.
So this abuse of power wasn't just hurting Walter, it was chilling the whole community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which makes the setting, Monroeville, even more ironic. The town celebrates To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah. Atticus Finch, the moral lawyer.
Yeah, but Stevenson points out the bitter irony. The book's harder truths, especially about racial injustice, didn't seem to take root there. Tom Robinson, the innocent black man in the novel. He's found guilty and dies trying to escape. It's a heartbreaking parallel to Walter's reality. The fiction was maybe easier to handle than the truth.
So how did the truth eventually come out? What was the breakthrough?
It started when Ralph Myers, the main witness, finally recanted. Admitted he'd lied, that he'd been pressured by crooked cops, that he didn't even know Walter.
Wow. That's huge.
Monumental. And then Karen Kelly backed him up, said Myers didn't know Walter. And crucially, she revealed the police were provoked by her relationship with Walter.
Suggesting racial animus was driving it from the start.
Exactly. This finally pushed the Alabama Bureau of Investigation, the ABI, to start their own independent look into the case. And they found evidence pointing to his innocence.
And then the media got involved. 60 Minutes.
Yeah, that was pivotal. Ed Bradley, David Gelber, they came down, did a thorough investigation, interviewed everyone, laid bare all the inconsistencies. It brought national attention.
Making it harder for the local system to just ignore it.
Right. Though local officials tried to discredit the report, of course, but the broadcast definitely raised doubts, even among local business leaders. The pressure mounted.
To the point where the Attorney General's office had to acknowledge it.
Eventually, yes. They asked the court to pause things, admitting they may have uncovered exculpatory evidence. A huge concession, really forced by the legal work in the public spotlight.
And Walter was finally released. When was that?
1993. After 6 years on death row, 6 years stolen, he said he felt like a bird.
But the injustice didn't end with his release, did it?
No. That's another heartbreaking part. Alabama had no compensation law for the wrongly convicted back then.
So nothing for those 6 years.
A bill was proposed, $9 million, but it went nowhere. It just brought more negative attention, even false paternity suits against him. Just awful.
And the officials responsible for putting him there, Sheriff Tate, the prosecutors.
Largely protected by legal immunity. Police, prosecutors, judges, they often have broad immunity from civil lawsuits, even for misconduct that leads to wrongful convictions.
So even though Walter was free, there was little accountability for those who put him through hell.
Exactly. The system protects itself. Walter tried to rebuild his life, restarted his logging business, found some peace in the woods.
But then tragedy struck again.
Yeah, a terrible accident. A falling branch broke his neck.
Mm.
And this led to trauma-induced dementia.
Mm.
He eventually passed away.
Just devastating. What did Stevenson take away as the main lesson from Walter's case?
He said it taught him that fear and anger are a threat to justice. They make us blind, irrational, and dangerous. And it led him to reframe the whole death penalty debate.
How so?
Instead of asking if they deserve to die, he asks, do we deserve to kill? It shifts the moral burden onto society, onto us. It forces a much deeper self-examination.
Beyond Walter's case, the book really highlights other vulnerable groups failed by the system. Let's talk about children.
Yes, it's a huge focus. How children are often prosecuted as adults with absolutely devastating consequences. Charlie's story is just wrenching.
He was 14, good student, no record.
Right, and he shot his mother's abusive boyfriend, who happened to be a police officer, apparently after seeing his mother beaten severely.
And the prosecutor pushed for an adult trial, maximum punishment.
Because the victim was an officer, no consideration for Charlie's age, the trauma, the context, just tough on crime.
And adult jail for a 14-year-old boy.
It was horrific. He weighed less than 100 pounds, sexually abused, raped by multiple men on his first night. And it continued. Unspeakable trauma.
Until Stevenson stepped in.
Thankfully, yes. He fought to get Charlie moved, first to a protected cell, then a juvenile facility. Eventually got the case transferred back to juvenile court, and Charlie was released before he turned 18.
A rare positive outcome, but it highlights the initial danger. And that couple, the Jenningses.
Amazing people. They heard about him, started writing, became like family, paid for his college. They really embodied Stevenson's belief that we have to hope better for each other, help each other recover. Otherwise, as he says, we are surely doomed.
Then there's Trina, another incredibly vulnerable child.
14, severe intellectual disabilities, a history of horrific trauma burns, abuse, homelessness, just unimaginable hardship.
And she gets caught up in a fire that killed 2 boys.
Accidentally involved, it seems, but sentenced to life without parole in an adult prison at 16. Mandatory sentence, no room for mercy or consideration of her background.
And the trauma continued in prison.
Raped by a guard, got pregnant, baby taken away, mental health collapsed, developed MS. And she's just one of nearly 500 in Pennsylvania alone, sentenced as kids to die in prison.
The largest population like that anywhere in the world.
In a single jurisdiction.
Yeah.
It's a staggering indictment of how we treat vulnerable children.
Ian Manuel's story, too. 13 years old, attempted robbery, shot someone.
Davy Baker. He got life without parole, despite his lawyer thinking it would be 15 years, did 18 years in solitary confinement.
18 years. In isolation, the psychological damage.
He became a cutter, tried suicide multiple times, just crushing isolation.
But then the victim, Debbie Baker, reached out.
Incredibly, yes.
Go.
On Christmas Eve. Started writing to him, became his advocate. She said what they were doing to him was mean and irresponsible, even acknowledging the harm he caused her. Remarkable empathy.
And Ian educated himself in solitary?
Read hundreds of books, wrote poetry, short stories. An amazing testament to the human spirit, really, finding a way to grow in those conditions.
Antonio Nunez, another 14-year-old, history of domestic abuse, saw his brother killed.
Just immense trauma. Got a gun for self-defense back in South Central LA, then gets involved in a shootout with undercover cops he didn't know were police.
And sentenced to die in prison?
Youngest person in the U.S. sentenced to life without parole for a crime where no one was even physically injured. Sentenced to die in prison at 14. It's chilling.
And Stevenson connects these modern cases to older ones like the Scottsboro Boys, George Stinney.
To show this isn't new. The same patterns of racial bias, lack of due process targeting the vulnerable, especially young black boys, have deep roots.
His point being that policies once aimed at controlling black people have now spread into the general system.
Exactly. And the tough-on-crime wave of the late 80s and 90s turned that harsh focus onto children, abandoning any idea that kids are different, that they can change, with devastating results.
The system's failures extend to the mentally ill, too, don't they? The statistics are shocking.
Over half of all prison and jail inmates have a diagnosed mental illness. That's nearly 5 times the rate in the general population.
5 times. And in some states, 10 times more mentally ill people are in prisons than hospitals?
Yeah. It's the result of deinstitutionalization, closing big psychiatric hospitals without creating adequate community support. So prisons became the default dumping ground, completely unequipped for mental health care.
Like that Angola prison case you mentioned, where guards were macing prisoners having seizures?
Because they couldn't comply with handcuffing rules during a seizure. It's just inhumane, a total system failure.
George Daniels' case sounds particularly egregious. Brain damage from an accident, clear psychosis.
Eating feces, hallucinating running naked, obvious signs of severe illness. But his lawyers fought over a tiny fee instead of investigating.
And the state relied on a fraudulent doctor.
And Dr. Ed Seeger, no medical training, declared George wasn't mentally ill, paving the way for his death sentence. EJI later exposed Seeger had faked being a doctor for years, testifying in many capital cases. It's horrifying.
Avery Jenkins, too. Severe mental illness, never investigated by his first lawyers.
Organic brain damage, schizophrenia, bipolar, plus that horrific foster care history. 19 homes by age 8, tied to a tree for days. Just devastating abuse.
But that story about the guard, the one with the Confederate flag tattoo.
Yeah, it's powerful. This guard, steeped in prejudice, hears Avery's story during the hearing. And later, he approaches Stevenson and says, kind of quietly, "Sometimes I forget how we all need mitigation at some point."
Wow. A moment of empathy, even there.
It shows that proximity, hearing the full story, can break through barriers. It reinforces Stevenson's belief in shared humanity, shared brokenness.
Which really brings us to his core philosophy, doesn't it? This idea of shared brokenness.
Absolutely. His constant refrain, each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. It challenges the whole foundation of a purely punitive system.
And that other powerful quote, the opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice.
Such a crucial reframing. It's not just about money. It's about dismantling unjust systems. And he argues the real measure of our society isn't how we treat the rich and powerful,
but how we treat the poor, the disfavored, the accused, the incarcerated, the condemned. That's the true test of character.
And he connects it back to himself so vulnerably. I do what I do because I'm broken too. It's not about superiority. It's about shared humanity.
Embracing that brokenness, he suggests, creates a need for mercy both to receive it and to show it.
Exactly. It fosters compassion.
Yeah.
And you see this philosophy in action through the Equal Justice Initiative, EJI.
Founded in 1989, Montgomery, Alabama, right in the heart of it all.
With that clear mission, free, quality legal help for the condemned, for those who have no voice. Facing huge opposition, of course.
And support came from surprising places, like Sam Crook, the guy with Confederate heritage.
Yeah, offering to help Walter McMillian simply because what happened to Walter McMillian ain't right. It shows basic fairness can cut across deep divides.
And that woman at the courthouse, the stonecatcher.
Such a powerful image. Someone who helps carry the burden of pain, the stones people throw. She reminded Stevenson how much it hurts to be that person, highlighting the emotional toll of the work.
And those moments of collective hope. Like the applause when Robert Caston and Joshua Carter were released from Angola after nearly 50 years.
Just breathtaking.
Mm-hmm.
Lawyers, prosecutors, families, even other inmates. A shared moment of humanity celebrating justice, however delayed. It shows what's possible.
EJI also developed a reentry program, right, for people coming out after decades inside.
Crucial work. Because freedom isn't just walking out the gate. They provide housing, job training, counseling, life skills, recognizing the need for ongoing support after years of institutionalization, especially for those locked up as kids.
So given all this darkness, all the systemic barriers, how does Stevenson maintain hope?
He talks about hope almost as a discipline, a moral choice. He loves that Václav Havel quote about hope being an orientation of the spirit. Not optimism, but the willingness to stand as a witness in a hopeless place.
To keep showing up even when it feels impossible.
Right. He finds reinforcement in small miracles, like Joe Sullivan's ability to laugh despite everything he endured, and his experiences internationally, receiving awards, talking to people in Brazilian favelas.
It showed him this is a shared global struggle.
Yeah. And that there's immense compassion out there for the marginalized. It fuels his commitment even when he's tired, even when he feels broken himself. He keeps going because the challenges facing vulnerable kids, especially, are just too overwhelming to ignore.
It's an incredible commitment. So we've journeyed through just mercy, the systemic racism, the wrongful convictions like Walter's, the failures towards children and the mentally ill. And underpinning it all, this call for empathy, for proximity, for mercy.
You really see how Stevenson and EJI embody that relentless commitment to standing with the broken, showing that our own humanity is tied up in how we treat those pushed to the edges. It's
Wow.
such a vital message.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, let's leave you with that really provocative question Stevenson poses, the one that flips the script on capital punishment. It's not just about whether they deserve to die.
But do we deserve to kill?
It forces us to look inward, doesn't it? At our own capacity for justice, for mercy. It makes us ask what kind of society we truly want to build. What stands out most powerfully to you from everything we've discussed today?